I stayed in London that time for about 4 years. At the end of the first time in London, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Through circumstances of events, I took some LSD, too much LSD, and I suffered with psychosis. It was the first time I ever had psychosis in my life. And I ended up going down to my aunt's, my uncle who I'm going to visit. I went down to his house, to him and his wife, and there was a situation. He wasn't there. He was away for the weekend, and I held my aunt and her friend and my cousin hostage in the house for a couple of days because I thought they were trying to get me murdered. And the police eventually came to the house, and I got sectioned under British law, and I was put into a psychiatric intensive care unit in the Homerton Hospital in the East End of London, right beside Hackney Marshes, where I remained probably for about 7 months and was on a lot of medication. I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my life. I tried to take my own life in that hospital. I tried to hang myself, and I got took down off the window. And
So tell us your name and where you're from.
my name is Willa White, better known as Willa White, and I'm from Ballymun.
What was it like growing up in Ballymun?
Growing up in Ballymun was really good. I was born in the 70s, so the 70s and the 80s for me in Ballymun was amazing. There was no phones, there was no technology. We made our own fun. If you had a football, you kicked it around the place. I wasn't really good at football. I was more kind of up to development on bikes and, you know, in the forest and running around with lads, kind of a bit wild on the streets, like, you know. But it was a great time with great memories of growing up in Ballymun and being with the lads, young lads that I hung around with at the time. It was amazing. No, never liked school. School was never for me, you know. I had a lot of stuff going on at home. I came from a family that was dysfunctional. My father dealt with a lot of trauma when he was a kid. Kind of generational trauma that was passed on down to myself and my sister. There was a lot of stuff going on at home, so I found it very hard to concentrate at school, primary school, and particularly secondary school. So school was kind of somewhere that I didn't want to be. I found it hard to evolve. I could read, I could write. I found it hard to absorb stuff, and with the late nights that I was getting at home through no fault of mine, through my dad, and my mum would usually be at the end of the violence and the stuff that was going on, that I didn't want to be in school. I wanted to be elsewhere, like, you know. In a sense, I think if things had been a little bit better at home, if my father was probably a lot more settled in himself and things were kind of some kind of what way normal, I suppose I'd have probably done well in school. But I just didn't want to be in school. School wasn't for me. School sometimes was a great escape. I was the class clown. I was the fucking idiot, I suppose, to speak that way. Never liked bullies. Never liked lads getting bullied. Didn't like people that had less than. Kind of was always a shield or or someone that would help someone that was kind of in times of struggles or being bullied by somebody. So I never liked that. And I think I probably carried it from seeing me dad being violent at home, that I didn't like violence, and I never grew up as a kid that was a fighter or anything like that. I kind of shied away from it. I think there was that much fear installed into me as a kid that violence just, it wasn't my way, you know. I just kind of, I saw other ways of entertainment or kind of escapism from what was really going on, you know.
And how did that affect you in your teenage years?
It affected me very, very badly. I went to secondary school, Ballymun Comprehensive, at 12 years of age, and was already taking solvents and drinking at the time, like, you know. So I carried it with me. It affected me. I was kind of fortunate enough that when I was 15 years of age, my mother and father split up, and that was kind of a big release for me. My sister had already left the family home at the time. She was 6 years older than me, so she was kind of gone, like, you know. She went at about 19 years of age and just couldn't put up with what was going on. My father was a very troubled man. My mother was a troubled woman as well. She She came from a family of 9 from Drimna and was dyslexic. Never knew she was dyslexic. Hadn't been diagnosed when she was a kid, and the nuns never knew that as well, and she got an awful time in school. And her mother, for some reason or other, kind of treated her the worst out of 9 kids. She was given all the chores. She was kind of like Cinderella, so to speak, that everything that kind of needed to be done at home, my mother was given the burden of doing it, and her mother didn't really get on very well. So my teenage years were kind of rock and roll, I suppose. It was drugs, and you know, you're kind of learning about yourself. You're going through puberty, you're dating girls. It's a very kind of confusing time, I think, for any teenager. And I really needed a male role model in my life. And my father, even though he was present, he was unpresent. You know, like even sports. I tried playing soccer for a while, and you know, he'd no interest in it. He didn't want to come to matches. He didn't want to do that. And so sometimes I used to just kind of go, you know, press the fuck it button and just go, you know what, fuck it. Like, why am I bothering, like, you know? So, yeah, my teenage years, for the first 5 and anyway, were good. I was 15, and then I left and went to live in London at 16 years of age, which when I think about it now is very frightening of it. My youngest daughter is 18, and I couldn't even imagine her now telling me that she was going to live in England. But I kind of had a free rein. My dad was caught up in his own shit. My ma was caught up in her own shit as well. And I just kind of went. There was a lot of lads over there. And from 16 up until about 19 in London, it was a crazy time. Like it was like, I was like that kind of hyperactive kind of dog that you bring out on a lead, and then when you bring him into a park and you take him off, it was just like I could do what I wanted. I could reinvent myself. I could be who I wanted to be. I always had a work ethic. I always kind of worked as a kid. I'd help the milkman or the guy that was selling the fruit and veg, or, you know, I'd sell the papers as a kid, and I always kind of worked. So when I went to London, I got a job straight away, and I was living in a squat with a load of lads from Dublin that were a little bit more, I suppose, streetwise than me, and a bit more knowledge kind of around drugs. And there was a lot of drug use going on where I was. I was the only one that worked in the squat. The lads were up to no good. They were out robbing and doing whatever they needed to do. And at that time, you could claim as many doles as you kind of wanted in England. Once you had someone's birth cert, you could basically open up an account and get a payment from the government. So a lot of the lads were at that, but I just kind of found going out and doing a little bit of work was kind of good for me head. Even though on the weekends and during the week I was probably smoking weed or I was drinking, I was functioning very well for someone who was in, I would say, the early stages of addiction, like from drugs, you know. I loved London, even though it was kind of to make me and to break me in a sense. Like, London was an amazing city. I'm actually going back in a couple of weeks' time. My dad has a couple of brothers over there that I go over to see once a year. They're old now. One of them is 93 and the other guy is 89. He'll be 90 in September. Two of them are amazing, man. One of them is in London since 1952. And like, my father came from nothing. Like, my father came from 16 children in a 2-bedroom flat in Cook Street there beside the Brazen Head pub, and they literally had not got a team. My uncle actually told me that he never knew what toilet roll was until he went to London, that he never knew what toilet paper was like. And I found that very hard to fathom and to digest, because my dad's brothers and sisters, 10 of them went to London. My grandfather was, without going into detail, was a monster. It was the best way to explain it. I never met the man. I'm kind of delighted that I didn't. But there was a lot of stuff that went on at home in my dad's flat where he lived. My grandmother was a very quiet woman. My father's father, my grandfather, was a very violent man and a very dark man with other stuff that went on in the house. And my grandmother was pregnant for 16 years in a row. So there was 16 years between the youngest and the eldest, and 10 of them went to London. And when I kind of delved a little bit into my grandfather's past, I understood why 10 of them went. I mean, if I was one of the 6, I wouldn't have even stayed in Dublin. But some of them did. And a lot of them kind of ended up like my own dad, troubled and traumatised with drink. And when I look back, I can understand why, you know. I stayed in London that time for about 4 years. At the end of the first time in London, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Through circumstances of events, I took some LSD, too much LSD, and I suffered with psychosis. It was the first time I ever had psychosis in my life. And I ended up going down to my aunt's, my uncle who I'm going to visit. I went down to his house, to him and his wife, and there was a situation. He wasn't there. He was away for the weekend, and I held my aunt and her friend and my cousin hostage in the house for a couple of days because I thought they were trying to get me murdered, which wasn't the case at all whatsoever. It was just the drugs. And I was very frightened and I was very scared. And the police eventually came to the house and I got sectioned under British law, and I was put into a psychiatric intensive care unit in the Homerton Hospital in the East End of London, right beside Hackney Marshes, where I remained probably for about 7 months and was on a lot of medication. I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my life. I tried to take my own life in that hospital. I tried to hang myself, and I got took down off the window, and yeah, it was a very, very, very frightening time in my life. I still sometimes, and I will when I go over again in a couple of weeks, I drive past that hospital and I look up at the bay window where I used to stand or sit and look out and used to think to myself, you know, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. Like,
How do you find the strength to get through that?
I don't know, you know, I think I get the resilience and the strength from my mother. She was an amazing woman, you know, for everything that she'd kind of dealt with in the face of adversity, and you know, I kind of hoped that things would get better, and like I really, really thought like this is where I'm gonna be. Like I'm gonna spend the rest of my life there. And for a young teenage man from Dublin, from a different country to where I was, and I'm in this psychiatric hospital with people that are really, really unwell. Come here, I'm not taking away the fact I was unwell at the time as well, but I just kind of thought I'm doomed. I'm here, like, you know. The medication I was on an awful lot of medication. I was on like haloperidol, Cogental, lithium. I was on an injection of Haldol a week. I was on Librium. I was on Ligactol. I was on a lot of medication, a lot of psychiatric medication. And eventually, when I did get released out of there after about 7 months, and if I be honest, I don't think I was well enough to get released. But my dad and my sister in Dublin had said they'd look after me, because my mother had come over to look after me in London, and she made a life for herself there. She didn't go back to Dublin after that, you know. So I went back to live with my sister in Dublin. I was on a psychiatric daycare program. I was really, really unwell. A lot of the guys that I used to hang around with didn't want to hang around with me anymore. I was unpredictable, I was unwell, and a lot of people, you know, just kind of didn't want to know me. I was kind of left in the backgrounds, and my sister, she took kind of care of me and looked after me and was kind of like me nurse and me chaperone, and fed me and clothed me. There was days I just couldn't get out of bed. And they were very, very dark times. My sister eventually detoxed me off the medication I was on, because nothing seemed to be happening in the clinic. And over time I kind of got back on my feet and was doing all right for a while, and then I done the same thing again. You know, I put my hand back into the fire again to see really, did I get burned? And I did. I ended up in another psychiatric hospital. I ended up in Dundrum Central Mountain Hospital, and then from there I got out and I went off the head a little bit again. And then the last stint I ended up was Vincent's Hospital on the Richmond Road on the north side of Dublin. So they were the 3 times, and I think that the running joke I always had was that, 3 psychiatric hospitals, psyche hat trick would probably be the phase that I'd be saying for that. So that was the last time I ended up in psychiatric care. I was about 21, and then kind of got caught up in the heroin scene in Dublin. Like very, very quickly after that, stayed away from acid and ended up running with a couple of lads from the inner city, and just kind of bringing packages from here to there, and kind of thought it was a gangster type of thing, but there was no like, as I says, I wasn't violent. I wasn't cut out for that type of stuff. I think what I was just kind of looking for is that I was looking for what I never got at home. I was looking for acceptance from other people. I was looking to be wanted. I was looking to be needed. The 2 things I never got as a kid growing up was love and affection. And I was getting a false kind of love and affection, so to speak, from these people who couldn't really give a fuck about me, if the truth be known. And start taking smack probably at about 2021. Then eventually the lads I was running with kind of got wind that I was on it, and I was of no use to them because, if I got nicked or anything like that, something, probably wouldn't have been able to hold me piss with a heroin habit. And then I was just kind of left in the wilderness. I was going out with a girl, and started smoking heroin at first. Never kind of thought, and I hate that word junkies. I never thought, I'd end up, using intravenously or any of that type of stuff. But inevitably I did. I started using intravenously, and over time things got worse. I started going to prison. First time I'd been to prison was when I was about 18. But then when I started going to prison for my heroin use, it was always for money for drugs all the time. I was on a methadone maintenance. I'd lived homeless on the streets. I'd begged on the streets. I had become the person that I never wanted to be. I stole from my family, my mother, when she came home, or if I went to London, my sister, my father. I'd done things that I said I'd never do, but ended up doing, and I had moments of clarity where I kind of thought to myself, I'm better than this, but the train had left the station so far down the tracks that I couldn't really find a way back. I didn't know how to get myself together. I didn't know how to stop. I thought stopping for me was just being on a methadone maintenance and being on a clinic, and everyone that I knew was kind of taking drugs. Mates and acquaintances of mine were dropping dead. They were ODing. There was lads taking their own lives. Like 90s in Dublin, the drug epidemic, the smack epidemic was crazy. And I just couldn't really see a way out, and eventually what happened to me was I got caught with some drugs, and I went on the run to London. And when I went on the run to London, I went over to my mum, and my dad had given me some money at the time. He'd retired from his job. He worked for Aircom at the time. And I had £1,000 sterling, and I landed in King's Cross before I got to my mum's, and I just ended up smoking crack and using heroin for the night. Got on a methadone maintenance in London and got a little job and thought that things was okay for a while, and I was kind of functioning, as an addict. Wasn't using, was just kind of sticking to the methadone, smoking a bit of weed, drinking, and that was my kind of clean. I was telling people once I wasn't using street drugs, I used to kind of think, my mind was deluded that I wasn't using. Over time then I just picked up again. Things got worse, started using crack. And that was kind of the downfall and the spiral where I was to go into. My mum was living with her partner at the time down the road, and I was using her flat kind of as a crack house, I suppose, so to speak, and there was people in and out of it, and it was just a horrible, horrible time. My mum eventually threw me out, and I eventually ended up living on the streets. I was going out with a girl at the time. She'd come over from Dublin, and eventually I got extradited home to Dublin, which I thought was the end of my life. And I thought it was devastating, but it was probably, when I look back at it, it was probably the best twist of fate that ever happened. I was in Brixton prison for 6 weeks, awaiting extradition. Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about and reflecting. I remember the solicitor coming to Stoke Newton police station and asking me, and I was, the only thing I was worried about that day is that I had my partner's tracksuit bottoms on and there was a rose on the pocket of them, and I just kept covering the rose with my hand. And that was the least of my worries. But I remember the solicitor asking me, was I part of an illegal organisation or a terrorist organisation in Ireland, you know, i.e. the IRA, and I was like, I mean, if you took a look at me, I could barely walk, and if I might be part, she asked me, was I avoiding tax evasion? And she said she had to ask me these questions, even though I laughed at some of them, you know. She says, well, the best thing for you to do when you go to Bow Street Magistrates in the morning is to just waive your right to extradition and get yourself back to Dublin. She says, I don't know whether you're aware, but there's a guy at the moment in Belmarsh prison called John Gilligan, and he is fighting extradition. She says, but he's going to get sent home. And I remember that well. So the next morning I just went up and I waived my right to extradition. I said, I want to go home. And I went home about 6 weeks later, drug-free. I was clean for the first time in a long, long time. I got clean in Brixton prison, but I didn't know how to maintain it. And I got back to Dublin, and within a week I've been in Mountjoy. And after getting 5.5 years sentence with a review after 3.5 years, I ended up back using again. You know, using intravenously in a prison that has a big rate of HIV and hepatitis C. Didn't really care. The girl I was going out with, she got a suspended sentence, and I just ended up in prison, and it was horrible. You know, as I said, I'm not into violence. I've seen a lot of violence in prison. I tried to kind of escape and stay out of the way of the heavy stuff that was going on. The only good thing I really had going for me is that I was kind of funny and I had a good sense of humour. So kind of the tough lads that was in there, I was kind of like the joker of the group. They'd bring me with them and they'd give me a bit of stuff, and then I joined the choir, and you know, I'd done a couple of things. I'd done music in prison as well, and I joined a drama society that they had, and we put on a couple of plays. We done the Play on the Stars, and it's actually on at the moment in the Abbey. The Play on the Stars. I played Flute or Good. It was a great play. Sean O'Casey, and everyone that was in the play had a heroin addiction. It was crazy. But we done a really good job. My mum come home from London at the time to see the play. Yeah, I had a couple of good times in prison where things were kind of all right, but most of it was doom and gloom. But coming near the end of my sentence, probably with about a year left, I knew that if I didn't get my shit together, that I was going to do the full sentence, which was 5.5 years. And a guy introduced me to NA, Narcotics Anonymous. He said, look, there's a meeting on of a Wednesday night. He said, they bring in cigarettes. And that was what attracted me. So I went to this meeting. Did I know I had a drug problem? Yeah, I did. I knew I was an addict, and I knew my life was controlled by drugs. And I went to this meeting and I didn't really get anything out of it. And I went to a couple after that. And then I went to a meeting and I met a fella that I used to use with. And that was kind of the turning point for me, you know. He looked well, he smelt well, he dressed well, he told me he was married, that he drove a car, that he had a house. And that was really what attracted me. He said to me, Willa, he says, there's a way out. He says, this is the way out. He says, you know, I questioned the kind of God thing. He says, there's nothing to do with God. And he said a great thing to me. He says, the difference, he says, this is a spiritual program. He says, honesty, open-mindedness and willingness. He says, if you can get them 3 things in your life, he says, you're going to be okay. He says, it's a spiritual program. He says, the difference between religion and spirituality, he says, is that religion is for people who want to go to heaven. He said, and spirituality is for people who'd been to hell. And I had been to hell a couple of times in my life. So I asked for help. I asked a prison officer, Mark Farrell. He'd asked me before, he says, look, is there anything I can do for you? He said, if you need any help, ask me. And I remember that day thinking that the whole prison was looking at me when I walked up the landing towards him. It was the bravest thing I ever done in my life. You know, I always say to people, the biggest and bravest thing you'll ever do is ask somebody for help. Don't suffer on your own. And I walked up the landing and he knew the minute he see me. He said, are you looking for help? I said, I am. I said, I need to do something. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, I'd like to go to the detox program in the medical unit. I said, and try to get over to the drug-free prison in Glengarriff Parade in the training unit. He said, look, leave it with me. And he come back a couple of weeks later. He says, look, I'm after getting you an interview. You had to get an interview to get to this place. And there was a backlog. There was only 10 beds. And I went and I done the interview and I got the place. I remember leaving the landing that day and packing all my stuff in the bag. And it's just a walk around the prison. You go kind of through a gate and into the medical unit, and it was a week's detox. There was 10 of us in that detox unit. I was actually only up there about 3 months ago doing a talk in the unit where I was. And out of the 10 lads that was in that, 8 of them are dead. There's only me and another lad that's alive. So, you know, I'm very lucky. I went into the drug-free prison and I started going to meetings, and I was drinking while I was there as well. You could throw drink over the wall where we were at the canal. But eventually, when I did get out of prison on the 3rd of April 2001, I drank. I went with my dad and I had a drink. But I knew the next morning, I was in my sister's flat in Ballymun. I knew something had to change, because I know that if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I made the decision to go to NA and to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And you know, I'm not sitting here promoting NA. I think whatever way works for anybody that's suffering with addiction, whether it's drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, whatever the addiction might be, NA kind of worked for me. And I done 90 meetings in 90 days. And over them 90 meetings in 90 days, the compulsion and the obsession to use, which I'd suffered with for years and years, was just kind of lifted. It wasn't like a ray of light or anything come in a window. I just, over time, and surrounding myself with people that didn't use anymore, and in a good place, like that really wanted me to do well. I kind of thrived. And the first year of my recovery, I got on a day program, the ACRG, an aftercare recovery group, and I had done a bit of work on myself and kind of looked at myself. My partner that I was with at the time got pregnant. So literally in the first year, I'd a new kid. I'd no kids. You know, this child came into the world, and I just felt this love when I held her. You know, when she was born, her mother was in getting a shower and I was giving her a bottle, and I just said to myself that this kid is never going to feel any of the feelings I ever felt as a kid. I'm going to give this kid unconditional love, unconditional affection. I'm going to be there. I'm always going to be present. I'm going to do all the stuff that my mother and father, unfortunately for them, didn't have the capabilities to do. This kid was going to have all that stuff, you know. And life started, and I got a job, and I got all the things that come with recovery, the material stuff. I got the car, and I ended up getting a mortgage on a house. And I met Des Bishop. Des won't mind me saying, I met him at meetings. Des is in recovery. And I was at a convention one time, and they asked me to do the auction. They used to have an auction, and I got the mic, and I was having a bit of a laugh, and I was funny. And Des come up to me after. He says, Des was doing stand-up at the time. He says, do you know, you're very funny. And I, you know, without being kind of smart, I kind of knew that I was, but I'd never ever thought of it, you know, career as a stand-up comedian. He says, you know, you're really, really funny. Like, and he come up with this idea about doing a program about me for RTE, about me embarking on the world of stand-up comedy from getting out of prison. And I opted not to do it. I said, look, I'm not going to do this, because I didn't want to be branded the ex-drug addict comedian, you know, ex-convict, because I knew that in interviews you know, I'd have to bring up my past all the time, and I kind of wanted to leave my past behind me. And there was other people to think about. I had family at the time, and I worked at the time, and I didn't want to kick it all up, and I didn't want to be just kind of known as, you know, an ex-drug addict and an ex-criminal. So I said, look, I'm not going to deal with Des. And Des was very understanding, and he was very supportive. And he said, look, he said, if anything else comes up, I'll keep you in mind. And then this program come up, Join the Hood. Des Bishop's Join the Hood, where he went into disadvantaged areas, and he got like a few people from the area. So Ballymun was the pilot where I was from. And then he went into Knocknaheeny in Cork, which is a fairly rough area. Then he went into Moyross in Limerick, and he went to Belfast, and, you know, he went to different places. So we done a 6-week workshop with Des on how to do stand-up comedy. And at the end of it, it was filmed in the Access Theatre in Ballymun. And the local community and your family came to see it. And it kind of started from there. So when the whole series was finished, Des went on tour, and he brought us on tour with him. He brought a few of us like to different venues. So we were playing like Vicar Street and all these big places, and it was amazing. It was a great, great time. And eventually Des says, look, this is all going to stop, and if you want to keep doing it, you need to kind of cut your own teeth and make your own way. And that's what I done. I kind of started from there. Started doing comedy and started doing gigs, and got paid then for the first time probably about a year later. Myself and Eric Lawler were doing a gig in Cork, and they were great, great times. I was only at the learning kind of how to drive at the time, and we drove the length and the breadth of the country, and they were amazing times. And recovery was great. You know, I was looking after myself, and I was going to meetings, and my sister, who we still had a great relationship with, I used to go over to my mother in London, you know, a couple of times a year. My relationship with my father, who was very, very difficult, was coming on well. I learned to love, to understand, and to accept what had happened. I made amends for the stuff that I'd done to all my family and people that, you know, that I'd done, you know, kind of bad stuff to, which really wasn't that bad when I think about it. 2009 was a big year. My sister was diagnosed with cancer. That was very, very difficult. I remember then in 2010, things had really got bad, and she ended up in hospice care down in St. Francis Hospice in Raheny. And this woman that had always been there for me, who was like my mother, my father, my brother, and my sister, was asking me to help her. And I couldn't help her. This woman that had helped me so much in my life, I couldn't help. And she died on the 17th of October 2010 at 4:15 in the afternoon of a Sunday. And we were all there with her. And part of me died that day with her, you know. She was like the lighthouse that I always pulled into when things got bad when I was a kid, like, you know. She was the shelter from the storm, like, you know. And I fucking miss her terrible, you know. Still to this day, it's 16 years now, like, you know. She would have been 60 in January, just gone. She was an amazing woman. And to go at 44 years of age was a bit cruel, you know. 2 young sons as well. Life goes on. While your world is falling apart driving up the road in a hearse, everybody else's life is going on, you know. When my sister died, I got a moment of clarity, and I realised that I was just losing one person. One person was dying in my life, but for my sister, everybody was dying. She was losing everybody. So I can imagine how difficult it was for her if I thought it was difficult for me. So yeah, I got up after that and kind of dusted myself down, and, you know, grief was kind of to follow. 2015 was another big year. Split up with my ex-partner. Had a second child at this stage. Ava came along, and my dad got diagnosed with cancer. I stopped going to meetings, and I took my foot off the pedal, and I ended up going back to live in Laytown. I looked at the hatch one morning in the attic, and my head told me to hang myself. And it was very, very real, and I really wanted to do it. And I entertained the thought for a few weeks, and thank God I didn't. I ended up going to Cork through circumstances of events, and I ended up going back to meetings, and I haven't stopped going since then. And in 2016, my dad died. He died in the hospice in Harold's Cross, and I remember him saying to me, a few times in life that the worst feeling you'll ever feel in the world is loneliness. And he said to me about a week before he died, he says, I don't want to die on my own. And I told him, I made a promise to him, I says, you won't. I says, I'll be here with you. He had great acceptance around dying. My dad, when he died on the 11th of March, Friday morning, at 12:15, I was there with him. There was only me and him. And I was delighted that there was nobody else there, like, you know. And it was the most intimate time that I ever had with my father. And I was able to hold him, and I was able to love him, and, you know, tell him that he was going to be okay, that my sister was waiting on him. And, you know, as heartbreaking as it was a very beautiful, very poignant memory that I have in my life, you know. Yeah, life went on again after that. You know, we buried my dad with my sister, and, you know, it's very hard going over to his little flat where he lived and packing up his stuff and his belongings, and I still have the clothes that he passed in a bag in the attic at home, and, you know, with memories of him, and I try to take the good ones, you know. Comedy career kind of moved on, and eventually then in 2016, you know, just after my dad passed, I met an amazing woman who's my fiance now at the minute, and she was kind of the making of me, you know. My two kids were there with me as well, and I kind of had, not distractions, like, but I had stuff that kind of kept me away from being in my head an awful lot of the time. And Linda just kind of seemed to come along at the right time, you know. And I think it was probably the right time for her and her life with the stuff that she'd been through, you know. And my mother, I think the loss of my sister Susan, I think when Linda came along, it was like she got a second daughter. And I think with the loss of Linda's mother, that Linda got like a kind of a surrogate, second kind of mum, and the bond between them was really, really special, and it was amazing, like, you know. Linda always says to me, I got two for the price of one. She said, I got you and your mum, like, you know. And that was great, like, you know. And then, you know, my mum suffered with COPD, and she hadn't been well, but she was an amazing woman, my mother, you know, and the love that she never got as a kid, she gave her out tenfold, you know, to myself and to the grandkids, and she was just great. She was a character. Yeah, in 2024, she passed away, and that was kind of it was devastating, you know. So grief is a horrible, horrible thing. Like, you grieve for different people in your life differently, I think. You know, the grief isn't the same for everybody. Like, it's the relationship that you have with them and how they made you feel. And, you know, grief for me is just love that has been lost by the person that's passed. Like, and I think the stronger the love, the stronger the grief. And I really grieved for my mother, you know. At the time I was doing a play when my mum died called The Examination that I'd won an award with. I won Best Actor at the Dublin Fringe Festival. Like, in 2024 was like a really big year for me. It was very, very bittersweet. Like, I sold out the Gaiety, and I sold out the Olympia, and I sold out 3 Liberty Halls, and it was really, really good. But, you know, my mum passing just kind of shadowed her all the time. Like, and I grieved really hard for her, myself and my partner, you know. But look, life goes on, and she got cremated. I have her at home in the house, and I say good night to her, and I say good morning to her, and I talk to her sometimes, and she wants to go on the beach up in Laytown where she used to be with my sister, and I'm just not ready to let her go yet. I will eventually. I was blessed for her. She was an amazing woman. She came home the year after my sister died in 2011, and it was great to get them last kind of few years in with her, and to be the son that she always wanted me to be, like, you know. She said to me once that winning the lottery wouldn't replace the feeling that she has about me getting clean and sober. Like, so that was really a big thing. So my family got to really see a lot of the good stuff that happened in my life, like, you know. You know, I was very, very fortunate And I always say that if someone had told me all them years ago that when you come into recovery, all your family are going to pass away, I wouldn't have come into recovery. But luckily enough, I got the tools and I got the capabilities and the understanding from other people that when people die, you can get through this. So I'd no excuses to use and I'd no excuses to drink, and and I've been through a lot of shit in recovery, just personal kind of stuff that went on, and I just kind of always had the resilience that I got from me ma and the strength to come out the other side. I've had more good times than bad. I've lived a really good life. I've done some amazing stuff. I've an amazing partner. I've 2 amazing kids. I've 2 amazing grandkids. My mum and my dad and my sister are gone, but I still feel them, They're like the wind, I can't see them, but I feel them. They're still with me. Oh yeah, I get a little bit upset. I get a little bit emotional. I'm okay with that. I'm getting a little bit emotional now. And it's the grief. It's the grief that I have for missing them. With Mother's Day as well. It's been a couple of days ago. It's kind of like, I reflect and I think about her. I really, really do. I can't emphasise enough how much of an amazing woman that she was. So life goes on. You get up, you get on with it, you go back to work, you get back on stage, you build yourself back up, and you get back together. And the new show I'm doing at the moment, I've written a show called Dead Man Talking, and the show is really around my family and really around that I should have been dead before my mother, my father and my sister. I should have been well gone. I should have been gone at that suicide attempt in London. I should have been dead from the couple of times I overdosed when my mother and my father and my sister were still alive. But for some reason or other, I'm not. I'm here. I was able to go to their funerals. I was able to read the eulogy. I was able to, be there to feel the feelings. The feelings that I felt that drugs suppressed all the time. When I felt feelings coming up that were uncomfortable, I'd put drugs into me and it would just push them all back down. But to feel grief on a scale where you've no drink and no drugs in you is a powerful feeling. I think love is the strongest feeling you'll ever feel in the world, and grief, I think, is the second. And we all deal with it differently. Yeah, the show is about stories about my mother, my father, and my sister, and making light of the situations in life, sometimes that were a little bit tragic, but were a little bit funny. The 3 of them people have moulded me into the person that I am today, so I think it's my way of being grateful and my way of thanking them and talking about them and just keeping them alive. I fucking missed them. I really miss them, and a lot of people know me, to be this fella, that's always full of smiles and full of jokes, and it's a bit of laugh, and I like to give back, and I do a bit of, I'll give a little bit back in that, but I'm a work in progress. I haven't reached any destination. I'm still on the journey. I'm still trying to find myself, who I am, what I'm about. I try to give out hope to people that are in hopeless situations and tell them, look, if I have got through life and got through the stuff that I've got through, you can do it. You're no different to me, So I'm grateful. I'm very, very grateful to be where I am and to be in the position that I'm in at the moment in life. I'm really, really grateful for that, Yeah, comedy does help me. Yeah, comedy is very therapeutic. Comedy sometimes can be a great escape for me. If I've got stuff going on in my life, when I get on stage, I'm away from that stuff. It's like me drinking, me drugs. It takes me away out of my head. It's a great place to be. It's a great gift to have, to stand up in a room full of strangers that you don't know and be able to bring laughter into their lives and give them an escape from what's going on in their life. So it's like 2 great escapes. It's like I'm escaping sometimes from what's going on in my life, And then people who come to the comedy gig probably need a laugh for the stuff that's going on in their life. So it's a two-way kind of therapeutic counselling session, I suppose, for both parties involved, the punter and the performer. Yeah, I love it. I really, really love it. It's a special gift that I've been given, and long may it last. You know, there's no time scale with comedy. Like, once you can perform, I don't think there's any age limit on it. I knew a woman that performed and she was in her 90s. She died a couple of years ago. She was the oldest stand-up comedian I knew, and she was an amazing woman, and she was funny and people loved her, like, you know. So I'll stop when I want to stop, like, you know, but at the moment I don't. I've got loads of stories in me, loads of life experience, and loads of laughter to bring to other people's lives, like, you know. So I believe that whoever it is upstairs, whether it's God or my higher power or whatever, has kept me here for a reason. Like, I'm here for some reason, and the reason is probably to bring laughter into other people's lives, and to be able to love me family and me partner, and to be able to accept the love from other people as well is a great thing. Yeah, I love comedy. I love stand-up comedy. I love where it's brought me. I love the people that I've met along the way, and yeah, as Tommy Tiernan wrote once for me on a piece of paper, he says, run on for a long time. And I hopefully, you know, that I do run on for a long time and people still find me funny and still come to see me, you know. So yeah, it's great. It's a great gift.